audio working? Is this fine?
Yes, sir. Yeah, loud and clear. You may start presenting your slides, sir.
Just share this one. Yeah. So, nakita naman ang lahat na, no?
Yes, sir. We can see na your PowerPoint.
So, oops. So actually, my presentation today is just very short. This is my second time presenting this paper, and I hope by the open forum we can get new directions, new feedback for this paper that I'm working on. It's a work in progress paper about the Laurels and of course the Lyceum of the Philippines. It's more like a mix of institutional history. At the same time, we talk about the intellectual history of this family, not only Jose P. Laurel. And I've presented it last May in California, at the University of California, the CS Grad Conference, and this is the second time. And I'm very thankful for the PHA, for the organizers, for accommodating this paper. Now, when we talk about the family of the Laurels, we can look at almost all of them are, we can say, not only just educators, but people who are very active in politics. Of course, Jose P. Laurel Sr. and his sons. And majority of them, we can consider them as intellectuals. When we say intellectuals, we are talking about people not just producing works, but at the same time, they live up to their works, to their ideologies, and to whatever passion projects or whatever advocacy they have too. In that sense, Jose P. Laurel, of course, we know him, a branded wartime collaborator. That after the Second World War, Jose P. Laurel was returned to Congress, as a redeeming factor in Philippine politics. And after his return in the Congress, after all these issues about the collaboration, he established Lyceum of the Philippines. And in establishing Lyceum of the Philippines, we can see how he applied his pre-war and wartime development on the idea of nationalism, which is more geared on Philippinism. And this is a quote from Jose P. Laurel from his book, Forces That Make a Nation Great, in 1943. This was published during the war. And according to him, history teaches the rise and fall of nations depend essentially upon the underlying moral strength of the citizens. The idea of Laurel's nationalism, it's more on how can we, the citizens, be of help to the nation. So it's not a concept of nationalism. It's very patriotic. It's not a concept of nationalism that is very radical in nature. It's not a concept of nationalism that is very jingoist or xenophobic. Because during the Second World War, during the wartime years, Laurel was facing the problem on how to protect the people from the invading forces and from the problems of the war. And during the post-war period, Laurel will notice another problem, and this problem of neocolonialism or imperialism in the Cold War narrative or, say, descriptions. And during the rise of post-independence nationalism, Laurel would be active with Claro M. Recto, the usual Lorenzo Tañada. They will criticize the special relationship between the Philippines and the United States from 1951 to 1957. But we're not going to talk about Laurel's career in Congress. Rather, let us see Lyceum, how it developed to be that school who catered most of the nationalist ideas during the 1960s, and how it became a space, the concept of space, how it became a space for students in the 1970s during the rise of student radicalism or student militarism. So in 1952, Laurel thought of the idea of establishing a school. And this is during the pre-war period. While he was studying in Yale, he already developed such concept to establish an educational institution. And according to Laurel, the Lyceum of the Philippines would be the Alexandria for the masses. You have the elite schools of Ateneo, You have the elite schools of Santo Tomas. Now, Laurel want to cater those who cannot afford to go to the elite schools. And that is Lyceum, at the heart of Manila. With regard to the faculty members of the Lyceum then, who became part of the faculty, you have city mayors, members of Congress, senators, cabinet secretaries. These are the perfect roster in Lyceum on how to develop such civic ideas. Laurel's vision was not only to propagate the idea of nationalism in Lyceum, but at the same time to produce future leaders for the country. Again, going back to his wartime career and to the post-war career of Laurel in Congress, he wanted to produce a generation of students, not only to take care of the country, but at the same time to protect the Filipino national interests. Now, in 1958, there's a major recruitment of the best minds of the Filipino public service and the academe. And Laurel, according to some sources, it will be the bastion of nationalism. They will recruit people from UP. They will recruit people from the government. Unfortunately, Laurel died in 1959. And you see, Recto also died in the 1960s. When Tañada took over the mantle of nationalism and the fight against American imperialism, we have to understand that this is all happening in the Cold War context. That the continuing crisis is the idea of American imperialism. When Tañada took over, it was the beginning of the rise of the students, of student activism. And such concept is not only happening in the Philippines. When you check Europe, some parts of Southeast Asia, and even Japan, there's growing interest on student activism, on such leftist ideas against the idea of imperialism. And it heightened, of course, in 1965. Now, major student organizations will come to Lyceum. They will be part of student organizations. They will start to play a more active role in politics. And of course, the rise of global Maoism, counterculture, the new left, it all reached Southeast Asia. And we have, comparative studies with regard to this, how the activism in Thailand have similar historical patterns here in the Philippines. And according to the writer Nick Joaquin, Quijano de Manila, when he wrote in 1968 the events in Paris, he said that this was also spread in the academy in the Philippines. And it did. And according to the economist Emmanuel Cuya, for example, he recalled that his job in Lyceum was to basically promote nationalism. So all these city mayors, all these public servants, all these people from UP recruited at the Lyceum, their goal was to promote nationalism. But for the students, there's a different effect. They saw Lyceum, they saw the nationalist brand of Lyceum as a chance for them to counter American imperialism. And that makes Lyceum a space for the creation of such ideas. That's why in the 1960s, a new breed of intellectuals saw the opportunity to join Lyceum. You have junior faculties in Lyceum joining in the 1960s. One of them, just one example, is Jose Maria Sison, for example, a nationalist who turned full-time communist. He taught social sciences in 1964. You have Jose David Lapus also. But after the events of the first quarter storm, he will transfer to Santo Tomas. And what happened to Santo Tomas during the 1970s? There was a move for Filipinization. There was also cry with regard to some sort of colonial administration. And according to a historian, Joseph Scalise, Lyceum would serve as the base operations for the creation of the Partido Komunista ng Pilipinas, new youth organization na Kabataang Makabayan. So, we cannot only see recruitment to these organizations as the main source on why these students became active in politics or in activism, but because of Lyceum being a space to develop these ideas how Lyceum catered these ideas. At the same time, the goal of Laurel to establish a school to promote nationalism. And nationalism is a very complicated topic. Nationalism differ depending on the time we talk about this idea. But during the late 1960s and the early 70s of the first quarter storm, the idea of nationalism would be the antithesis to the continuing crisis, what we call American neocolonialism or imperialism. They saw nationalism as the answer, to join these organizations, to be enlightened, how to criticize such foreign ideas that is hampering the development of the Philippines. And in the words of Jose Lacaba, writing about the first quarter storm, the signs of change were on the horizon. A powerful storm was sweeping the land, a storm whose inexorable advance no earthly force could stop, and the name of the story was history. So it all happened. I have to be transparent with this one, as I'm still doing all the oral interviews and getting all the primary sources to make my arguments stronger about this paper. And that ends my lecture for today. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much, Sir Luis, no, for sharing an interesting, short but interesting discussion on the role and contribution of Lyceum of the Philippines University in the student activism in the year 60s to 70s. And that's it, no? That ends the paper presentation for this session. Thank you so much to our presenters, no, to our three